The Zephyrin Empire had been conquering planets for hundreds of years. Their ships were fast, their weapons were powerful, and their soldiers were trained from birth to fight. They had taken over 47 different star systems, and no one had ever beaten them in battle. When their scout ships found Earth, a small blue and green planet near the edge of the galaxy, they smiled. This would be easy. Commander Vexthor stood on the bridge of his massive warship and looked at the reports about Earth. The planet was home to creatures called humans. These humans were still very young as a species. They had only just started to explore their own solar system. They had a few satellites floating around their planet and one small space station. Their weapons were simple guns and bombs that used chemicals to explode. Compared to the Zephyrin energy weapons and plasma cannons, human technology looked like toys. What made Vexthor laugh even more was how divided the humans were. The planet was split into almost 200 different countries. These countries argued with each other all the time. They fought over land, resources, and ideas. Some countries were rich while others were poor. Some had advanced technology, while others were still developing. The Zephyron had never seen such a disorganized species before. Vexthor called his officers together. They gathered around the holographic display showing Earth rotating slowly in the center of the room. The planet looked peaceful and completely defenseless. "We will send 3 battle cruisers," Vexthor announced. "That should be more than enough. We will give them the standard warning. They will surrender within days, maybe hours. Then we add another planet to our empire." His officers nodded in agreement. None of them thought this would be difficult. They had conquered species far more advanced than these humans. This was just another routine mission. The 3 Zephyrin battle cruisers entered Earth's solar system 3 days later. Each ship was enormous, stretching nearly 2 miles from front to back. They were covered in armor that could withstand most weapons. Their shields could deflect missiles and energy blasts. Their engines could bend space itself, allowing them to travel faster than light. To the Zephyron, these ships represented centuries of technological advancement. On Earth, the arrival of the alien ships caused immediate panic. Deep inside Cheyenne Mountain in North America, alarms started screaming. Computer screens flashed red warnings. Colonel Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency call came through. He ran to the command center, his heart pounding. "What's happening?" Jake demanded as he burst through the doors. Lieutenant Amy Parker was sitting at her station, her fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "Sir, we have 3 unidentified objects in orbit. They're massive. Each one is bigger than anything we've ever built. The energy readings are off the charts." Jake stared at the main screen. 3 enormous shapes hung in the darkness of space above Earth. They looked like nothing humans had ever created. Smooth dark metal reflected the light from the sun. Strange markings covered their hulls. These were clearly ships, but they were far beyond anything Earth could build. "Are they responding to our communications?" Jake asked. "No, sir. We've tried every frequency, every language, nothing." Then, without warning, every television, radio, and computer on Earth received the same message. The Zephyron had hacked into all of Earth's communication systems in seconds. The message appeared in every language simultaneously. The translation was perfect, done by advanced computers that had analyzed human broadcasts. The message was simple and terrifying. The Zephyrin Empire demanded Earth's complete surrender. Humans would become subjects of the Empire. They would follow Zephyron laws, pay tribute, and serve the Empire's interests. Any resistance would be met with total destruction. The message gave humanity 72 hours to accept these terms. The world erupted in chaos. People fled from cities, afraid the aliens would attack at any moment. Governments tried to maintain order, but fear spread faster than any official statement. In homes across the planet, families huddled together, wondering if they would survive the next 3 days. At the White House, President Helen Carter called an emergency meeting. She sat in the Situation Room, a secure bunker deep underground. Around her, screens showed world leaders from every major nation. Everyone looked frightened, but they were trying to stay calm. "We need options," Helen said. Her voice was firm, even though she felt terrified inside. "What can we do?" General Ben Harris stood at the front of the room. He was an older man with gray hair and a face that had seen many battles. He pulled up images and data on the screens. "Our analysis shows their ships have advanced shielding. Our missiles probably won't work. Even our nuclear weapons might not be enough to hurt them. And if we use nuclear weapons in orbit, the radiation could hurt us as much as them. So we're helpless? Asked the Prime Minister of Britain, his face appearing on one of the video screens. I didn't say that, Ben replied. He had a small smile on his face. I said our regular weapons might not work, but humans have never survived by playing fair. We survive by being clever, by adapting, and by never giving up. Over the next 72 hours, something remarkable happened. The countries that had been enemies for decades suddenly started working together. Scientists from America called colleagues in Russia and China. Military leaders who had never trusted each other began sharing information. Engineers, physicists, and strategists from every nation connected through secure channels. In secret laboratories around the world, people worked without sleep. At Area 51 in Nevada, Dr. Lisa Chen led a team trying to adapt experimental technology into weapons. At Cape Canaveral in Florida, rocket scientists modified their spacecraft. In underground facilities in Russia, China, India, and Europe, brilliant minds collaborated on solutions. They shared research that had been kept secret for years. They combined different approaches and ideas. The humans weren't trying to match Zephron technology. They knew they couldn't. Instead, they were preparing to use everything they had in ways the Zephron wouldn't expect. Every crazy idea, every experimental weapon, every prototype that had seemed too dangerous or impractical suddenly became valuable. The 72 hours passed. The Zephron waited for Earth's surrender, but no message came. The planet below remained silent. This confused Vexthor. Usually primitive species either surrendered immediately or begged for mercy. Silence was unusual. They're probably too frightened to respond, Vexthor told his officers. We'll demonstrate our power. A few strikes against their military bases should convince them we're serious. He gave the order to begin the attack. Dozens of Zephron attack craft launched from the 3 battlecruisers. They entered Earth's atmosphere, their sensors detecting the primitive radar and missile systems powering up below. The Zephron pilots almost felt sorry for these humans. They were so outmatched. This would be over quickly. But as the attack craft descended toward their targets, they had no idea what was waiting for them. Humanity had spent 3 days preparing, and they weren't planning to surrender. They were planning to fight back with everything they had. The Zephron were about to learn a very important lesson about humanity. Just because someone looks weak doesn't mean they can't hurt you. The Zephron attack craft came down through the clouds like falling stars. There were dozens of them, sleek and deadly, heading toward military bases across North America. Subcommander Krill led the first wave. She had done this hundreds of times before on other planets. It was always the same. The primitives would launch their weapons, the weapons would fail, and then they would surrender. Her sensors picked up the surface-to-air missiles launching from the ground below. Old technology, probably burning solid fuel. Her computer calculated their trajectory and speed. The missiles would reach her position in 40 seconds. Plenty of time for the point defense systems to shoot them down. The missiles exploded harmlessly in the air, destroyed by precise laser fire from the Zephron ships. Krill barely noticed. She armed her plasma weapons and prepared to destroy the military base below. This was routine. This was easy. Then something hit her ship and nothing was routine anymore. The electromagnetic pulse came from hidden locations all across the continent. These weren't the simple EMP weapons that other species used. Human scientists had worked for 3 days straight, combining research from a dozen different countries. They had made something new, something powerful. The pulse was tuned to exactly the right frequency to overload Zephron electronics. Krill's control panel went dark. Every screen shut off. The engines died. The weapon systems failed. For a terrifying moment, she sat in complete darkness as her attack craft fell from the sky. Emergency backup power kicked in after 5 seconds, but it was too late. The craft was tumbling, spinning out of control. Krill hit the ejection button and felt herself blasted clear just before her ship crashed into a wheat field in Kansas. All around her, other Zephron pilots were having the same problem. Their advanced ships, which had seemed invincible moments before, were falling from the sky like broken toys. Some pilots managed to eject, others weren't fast enough. The first wave of the Zephron attack was destroyed in less than 3 minutes. On the ground, Colonel Jake Morrison watched the results on his screens. He was in a mobile command center, a large truck filled with computers and communication equipment. He allowed himself a small smile. The EMP weapons had worked better than anyone hoped. "All units keep hitting them," Jake ordered into his radio. "Don't give them time to adapt." Around the world, other defense systems activated. These weren't the weapons the Zephron had seen on their scans. These were prototypes, experimental systems that had been rushed into production. In China, railguns fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. In Russia, directed energy weapons heated the air itself into plasma. In Europe, advanced missile systems launched warheads that split apart in flight, becoming dozens of smaller missiles that were harder to shoot down. Up in orbit, Commander Vexthor watched his tactical display with growing alarm. Red icons showed destroyed craft. Yellow icons showed damaged ones. Green icons showing functional craft were disappearing fast. This wasn't possible. How could primitives be doing this? "Get me a status report," Vexthor demanded. His tactical officer looked shaken. "Commander, we've lost 30% of the attack wing. The humans are using weapons we didn't detect in our scans. Electromagnetic pulses, kinetic weapons, energy systems we've never seen before, and their coordination is perfect. It's like they knew exactly what to do." "They had 3 days," Vexthor said, but his voice was uncertain now. "No, Commander. My analysis shows they've been developing these systems for years. Different nations, different approaches. They're using everything at once. Every time we adapt to one weapon, they hit us with something different." Vexthor felt something he hadn't felt in years. Doubt. He had assumed the humans would be easy to defeat because they were divided. But now he realized their division might actually be making them stronger. Each nation had developed its own weapons, its own strategies. The Zephron had prepared for one type of warfare. The humans were throwing a dozen different types at them simultaneously. "Recall all attack craft," Vexthor ordered. "We'll bombard them from orbit instead." The surviving Zephron ships retreated back into space. They had learned an important lesson, but so had the humans. The attack had cost the Zephron many ships and pilots, but it had also shown humanity something crucial. The aliens could be hurt, they could bleed, they could be beaten. In Houston, at Mission Control, Director Chris Martinez gathered his team. They had been working on a desperate plan, something so risky that it might not work at all, but they had to try. "The Zephron are pulling back to orbit," Chris said, looking at the tracking data. "They'll start bombing us from space. We need to stop them before they begin." "The rockets are ready," said one of the engineers, "but you know most of them won't make it through. We're sending up converted civilian craft against military battlecruisers." "I know," Chris replied quietly, "but we have to try. Give the order." Around the world, rockets began to launch. These weren't military missiles. They were converted civilian spacecraft, modified in desperate haste. Some were corporate rockets meant to carry satellites. Others were experimental shuttles. A few were actually tourist spacecraft that had been turned into weapons. Each one carried something different, a different approach to the problem of how to hurt an enemy that was far more advanced. The Zephron watched the rockets coming and laughed. Did the humans really think these primitive craft could harm mighty battlecruisers? It was almost sad. Vexthor ordered his point defense systems to destroy the approaching rockets. Hundreds of laser weapons began firing. Most of the rockets were destroyed, but not all of them. The humans had launched so many that even the advanced Zephron systems couldn't stop them all. The first wave consisted of simple kinetic weapons, just heavy chunks of metal moving very fast. The Zephron shield stopped most of them, but a few got through, slamming into shield generators with tremendous force. The second wave carried nuclear weapons, but they didn't explode against the ships. Instead, they detonated in carefully calculated patterns around the Zephron vessels. The nuclear explosions created massive electromagnetic pulses and intense radiation bursts. The Zephron shields flickered and weakened. The third wave exploited those weaknesses. These rockets carried experimental laser weapons based on fusion research. When the shields flickered, the lasers burned through, cutting into the hull armor of the battle cruisers. It wasn't enough to destroy the ships, but it was enough to damage them. "We're taking damage," Vexthor's tactical officer reported, his voice rising in panic. "Shields are at 60%. We have hull breaches on multiple decks. How are they doing this?" Vexthor had no answer. These humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to surrender. Instead, they were fighting back with a creativity and determination he had never seen before. Every attack was different. Every wave used new tactics. The humans weren't trying to match Zephron technology. They were using their own technology in unexpected ways. In a bunker beneath Geneva, military strategists from around the world worked together. Captain Ryan Cooper, a NATO tactical analyst, had helped design the attack strategy. He believed that humanity's only chance was to keep the Zephron off balance, never letting them adapt, always changing tactics. "They're stronger than us in every way," Ryan had explained, "so we don't fight their fight. We force them to fight our fight. We use speed, unpredictability, and sheer stubborn refusal to quit." The strategy was working. The Zephron were pulling back, trying to regroup. They had expected easy conquest and found a fight instead. But humanity knew this was only the beginning. The aliens would adapt. They would call for reinforcements. The real battle was still to come. Commander Vexthor sat in his command chair and tried to understand what had gone wrong. His fleet had lost ships, taken damage, and been forced to retreat. This wasn't how conquests were supposed to go. The primitives should have been crushed by now. Instead, they were fighting back with unexpected success. "Send a message to the Empire," Vexthor ordered. "Request reinforcements. Tell them this planet is more difficult than anticipated." He hated admitting that, but he had no choice. The humans had proven they could hurt his ships. If he wanted to conquer this planet, he would need more vessels, more soldiers, more firepower. But reinforcements would take time to arrive. Until then, he would have to change his tactics. "We'll bombard them from high orbit," Vexthor decided. "Stay out of range of their weapons. Eventually, they'll run out of rockets and missiles. Then we'll have won." On Earth, military leaders watched the Zephron ships pull back to a higher orbit. They knew what it meant. The aliens were going to start bombing cities and military bases from a safe distance. Earth's weapons couldn't reach them up there. It seemed like the end, but President Helen Carter refused to give up. She stood in the Situation Room surrounded by advisors and military officers. Everyone looked tired. They had been working without sleep for days, but there was still determination in their eyes. "We hurt them," Helen said. "They didn't expect that. We've shown them that Earth isn't easy prey. Now we need to show them something else. We need to take the fight to them." General Ben Harris stepped forward with a new plan. It was crazy, maybe impossible, but it was the only option they had. "We can't let them sit up there and bomb us. We need to attack them in orbit, force them to either flee or come down where we can hit them again." "With what?" someone asked. "We don't have a space navy. We barely have a space program. We have hundreds of spacecraft," Ben replied. "Civilian rockets, corporate shuttles, experimental craft, even old satellites we can convert into weapons. We put pilots in everything that can fly and we swarm them." The room went quiet. Everyone understood what Ben was proposing. He wanted to send pilots into space in ships that were never meant for combat. Most of those pilots wouldn't come back. It was a suicide mission. "Call for volunteers," Helen said softly. "But make sure they understand the risks. I won't order anyone to do this." The call went out across the globe. They needed pilots, engineers, anyone who could fly a spacecraft or operate weapon systems. They needed people willing to risk everything to defend their planet. The response was overwhelming. Thousands volunteered within the first hour. Tens of thousands within the first day. Lieutenant Amy Parker was one of them. She had been a fighter pilot before being assigned to NORAD. She knew how to fly, how to fight, and she wasn't afraid. Or rather, she was terrified, but she wouldn't let that stop her. When they asked for volunteers to pilot converted spacecraft into orbit, she signed up immediately. They gave her a mining shuttle. It was old, designed to carry equipment to asteroid mines that had never been built. Engineers had welded missile pods to the sides and installed a basic targeting computer. It wasn't a warship. It was barely spaceworthy. But it could fly and it could fight, and that was enough. All around Earth, similar preparations were happening. In Russia, cargo haulers were being fitted with weapons. In China, experimental military shuttles were loaded with missiles. In Europe, tourist spacecraft designed for brief trips to the edge of space were being converted into attack craft. India, Japan, Brazil, and dozens of other nations contributed whatever they could. Old satellites were programmed to ram into Zephron ships. Rocket stages that would normally be discarded were turned into bombs. It looked like chaos. It was chaos. There was no unified design, no standard tactics, no organized fleet structure. Every craft was different. Every pilot had their own approach. To any military mind, it seemed like madness. But that madness was about to become humanity's greatest weapon. The attack began at dawn. Hundreds of spacecraft launched from pads around the world. They rose into the sky on pillars of fire, heading for the Zephron vessels in high orbit. From the ground, it looked like a swarm of shooting stars climbing upward instead of falling down. Commander Vexthor watched the approaching craft with confusion. "What are they doing?" "This is suicide." His tactical officer studied the sensors. "Commander, I'm reading hundreds of individual craft. All different sizes, different propulsion systems, different weapons. Some of them are barely functional. They're throwing everything they have at us. Then we destroy them all," Vexthor said confidently. "Target the largest threats first. Our point defense systems will handle the rest." But the point defense systems were designed to handle organized attacks. They prioritized targets based on size, speed, and threat level. They fired in calculated patterns meant to create an effective barrier. The computers running those systems were very smart, but they expected their enemies to be smart too. They expected organized military tactics. The human attack wasn't organized. It was a swarm. Ships came from every direction at different speeds. Some flew straight at the Zephron vessels. Others spiraled in crazy patterns. A few actually tumbled end over end, their pilots barely in control. The targeting computers couldn't decide which threats to prioritize because they all seemed equally insane. Amy Parker's mining shuttle shook violently as she pushed the engines to maximum. Around her she could see other human craft, some sleek and modern, others old and patched together. They were all heading toward the same goal, the massive Zephron battlecruisers that hung in orbit like dark metal moons. "This is Falcon Leader to all craft," came Jake Morrison's voice over the radio. He was coordinating the attack from the ground. "Don't try to destroy them. Just hurt them. Damage their sensors, their communications, their weapons. Make them blind and deaf. Make them scared." Amy armed her missiles. They were converted mining charges, designed to break apart asteroids. They wouldn't penetrate the Zephron armor, but they didn't need to. She just needed to hit something important. She picked a cluster of antenna arrays on the nearest battlecruiser and fired. The missiles streaked through space and exploded against the ship's hull. The Zephron shields blocked most of the damage, but not all. Several antennas were destroyed. It was a tiny amount of damage to such a massive ship, but Amy wasn't alone. All around her, hundreds of other pilots were doing the same thing. Missiles, lasers, and kinetic weapons hammered the Zephron vessels from every direction. On one of the battlecruisers, Sub-Commander Krill had been placed in charge of defense after her capture and rescue by Zephron forces. She stared at her tactical display in horror. "We can't target them all. There are too many. They're coming from everywhere. Focus fire on sectors 3 and 7, Vexthor ordered. Create kill zones and force them through those areas." But the humans didn't follow predictable paths. When they saw areas of heavy fire, they went around. When the Zephron focused on the larger ships, the smaller ones slipped through. When point defense systems tracked fast-moving targets, slow-moving ones got close enough to launch their weapons. A converted satellite repair craft, piloted by engineer Danny Wright, managed to get right up against the hull of one battlecruiser. Danny had volunteered knowing he probably wouldn't survive. He had said goodbye to his family. He had made his peace. Now he attached a device to the Zephron hull and activated it before his craft was destroyed by defensive fire. The device was simple. A nuclear warhead with a timer. If the Zephron tried to remove it remotely, it would explode. If they left it alone, it would explode. The only way to disarm it was to send someone outside the ship to do it manually. Danny had turned himself into a problem that couldn't be solved with technology. Inside the Zephron fleet, another problem was developing. A team of teenage hackers led by Sophie Kim had been working with captured Zephron equipment. They had found a way to inject signals into the Zephron communication systems. They couldn't control the ships, but they could create interference, send false messages, and generally cause confusion. Orders got mixed up. Sensors gave conflicting readings. Weapon systems targeted the wrong ships. It wasn't enough to cripple the Zephron fleet, but it added to the chaos. Combined with the swarm of attacking craft, it was overwhelming. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Vexthor felt fear. The battle in orbit had been raging for 3 hours. The Zephron battlecruisers were taking damage from hundreds of sources. Small explosions dotted their hulls where missiles found weak points. Communication arrays were destroyed. Sensor clusters were blinded. Weapon systems were damaged. None of it was enough to destroy the massive ships, but it was death by 1,000 cuts. Commander Vexthor gripped his command chair as another impact shook the ship. His screen showed chaos. Red damage indicators covered the tactical display. Half his weapons were offline. Communications with the other battlecruisers were spotty, and the humans just kept coming. Every time his ships destroyed one of the attacking craft, 2 more seemed to take its place. "How many have we destroyed?" Vexthor demanded. "Over 300 human craft," his weapons officer reported. "But they keep launching more. They're using everything. Some of these ships aren't even armed. They're just ramming our point defense turrets." Vexthor couldn't believe it. What kind of species sacrificed themselves like this? The Zephron valued their soldiers, their ships, their resources. They fought with precision and efficiency. These humans fought like they had nothing to lose. They threw away lives and equipment without hesitation if it meant hurting the enemy. In the other battlecruiser, Sub-Commander Krill was having the same realization. She had been shot down on Earth during the first attack. She had been captured, questioned, and then rescued by Zephron forces. Now she was back in command, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this. "They're not fighting like a military," Krill said to her second officer. "They're fighting like a swarm of insects. No organization, no tactics, just overwhelming numbers and complete disregard for their own safety." "What do we do?" the officer asked. Krill had no answer. Traditional military doctrine didn't cover this situation. How do you fight an enemy that uses chaos as a strategy? How do you defend against attacks coming from every direction with no pattern to predict? On Earth, the cost of the battle was becoming clear. Families watched the news, seeing the names of pilots who had been killed. Each death was mourned, but no one was calling for surrender. Instead, more volunteers lined up. If one pilot fell, 3 more stepped forward to take their place. The determination was absolute. Humanity would not submit. In the bunker beneath Geneva, Captain Ryan Cooper watched the battle data with grim satisfaction. His strategy was working. The Zephron were confused, disorganized, and taking damage. But he knew it wasn't enough. The alien ships were still functional. They could still retreat, regroup, and come back stronger. Humanity needed something more. They needed a decisive blow. "We've got one shot at this," Ryan said to the other strategists. "Dr. Chen's team has finished the gravitational weapon. It's experimental. It might not work. But if it does, we could destroy one of their battlecruisers." "That's 1 out of 3, someone pointed out. "Even if we destroy one, the other 2 will escape and call for reinforcements." "Maybe," Ryan replied. "But if we destroy their flagship, if we show them that we can kill their biggest ships, maybe they'll decide Earth isn't worth the cost." The decision was made quickly. There was no time for debate or second-guessing. Dr. Lisa Chen and her team at the laboratory in New Mexico had been working around the clock on a weapon based on exotic physics. The Zephron ships used gravitational drives that bent space to achieve faster-than-light travel. Lisa had figured out how to destabilize those drives, turning them into bombs. The weapon required an enormous amount of power. They had to drain electricity from 3 states to charge it. People across the American Southwest lost power, as everything was redirected to the laboratory. For 15 minutes, millions of people sat in darkness, not knowing why, trusting that it was for a good reason. In the laboratory, Lisa watched the power levels climb. The equipment was making sounds it wasn't supposed to make. The temperature was rising. Everything about this screamed danger, but they were out of options and out of time. "Fire," Lisa said quietly. The weapon activated. It didn't look like much. There was no visible beam, no explosion, no dramatic effects. The weapon twisted space itself, creating a wave of gravitational distortion that traveled at the speed of light. By the time the Zephron detected it, it was too late. The gravitational wave hit the lead battlecruiser, the flagship where Commander Vexthor commanded his fleet. It targeted the ship's main drive, the massive engine that bent space for faster-than-light travel. Suddenly, space started bending in the wrong direction. The gravitational fields that the ship generated for propulsion turned inward instead of outward. The battlecruiser began to tear itself apart. The hull buckled and twisted. Internal bulkheads collapsed. The gravitational shear forces ripped through the ship like invisible claws. Vexthor had just enough time to realize what was happening before his ship exploded in a blast of light that lit up the night sky across half of Earth. The explosion was so powerful that it damaged the other 2 Zephron battlecruisers. They were forced to retreat further from Earth, their shields flickering and failing. Inside those ships, the surviving Zephron crews stared at their screens in shock. The humans had destroyed a battlecruiser. An entire battlecruiser gone in seconds. Sub-Commander Krill found herself suddenly in command of what remained of the Zephron fleet. 2 damaged battlecruisers, less than half their original attack craft, and a crew that was terrified. She looked at the tactical display showing swarms of human craft still attacking, still coming, still fighting. "What are your orders?" her tactical officer asked. Krill thought about her duty to the Empire. She thought about her training, her oath, her honor, but she also thought about survival. The humans had proven they could kill battlecruisers. If she stayed, she would likely die, and her remaining ships would be destroyed. The Empire would lose everything they had sent to this system. "All ships prepare for immediate retreat," Krill ordered. Her voice was steady, but inside she felt shame. The Zephron Empire had never retreated before. "Full power to engines. We're leaving this system. But Commander, our orders were to conquer this planet," the tactical officer protested. "Our orders didn't account for this," Krill replied, gesturing at the screens showing the chaos of battle. "Look at them. They're still coming. They've lost hundreds of ships and thousands of lives, and they're still attacking. They'll fight until we're dead or they're dead, and I'm not willing to die for this planet." The order went through the fleet. The 2 remaining battlecruisers turned away from Earth and began to accelerate. The human attacks intensified, as if sensing the aliens were trying to flee. More missiles, more lasers, more desperate ramming attacks. The Zephron ships took additional damage, but they kept going, building speed as they climbed away from Earth's gravity well. On the ground, Colonel Jake Morrison watched the Zephron ships fleeing on his displays. He wanted to cheer, to celebrate, but he was too tired. Around him, his staff was exhausted. They had been coordinating the defense for days without rest. But they had done it. They had driven off an alien invasion. "All units cease fire," Jake ordered. "Let them go." In orbit, Lieutenant Amy Parker saw the Zephron ships pulling away. Her mining shuttle was running low on fuel and air. She had launched with enough supplies for a one-way trip. But now, miraculously, she might actually make it home. She watched the alien vessels accelerate into the distance until they were just points of light, and then they jumped to faster-than-light speed and disappeared. The battle was over. Humanity had won, but the cost had been terrible. Hundreds of pilots had died. Thousands of people on the ground had been killed in the initial attacks. Cities had been damaged. But Earth remained free. The invasion had been stopped. In space, pieces of destroyed ships floated in orbit. Human ships and Zephron ships mingled together in death. Debris fields marked where the battles had been fought. And somewhere in that debris field, the remains of the Zephron flagship tumbled slowly, a monument to humanity's first victory against an alien invasion. The 2 remaining Zephron battlecruisers limped through space, their hulls scarred and damaged. They had jumped to faster-than-light speed as soon as they cleared Earth's gravity well, putting distance between themselves and the planet that had humiliated them. Now they were alone in the darkness between stars, assessing their losses and trying to understand what had happened. Sub-Commander Krill sat in her command chair and stared at the casualty reports. More than half of the attack craft were destroyed. The flagship was gone, along with Commander Vex Thor and 3,000 crew members. The remaining 2 battlecruisers had serious damage. Weapon systems were offline. Shields were weak. Communications were barely functional. This had been a disaster, but Krill had a duty to the Empire. She had to send a report explaining what had happened. More importantly, she had to warn them about Earth. She activated the recording system and began to speak, choosing her words carefully. This report would be reviewed by the highest commanders in the Zephron Empire. What she said might determine the future of relations between her people and humanity. "This is Sub-Commander Krill, submitting Battle Report 7749, she began. Her voice was tired but steady. "The invasion of the planet designated Earth has failed. Commander Vex Thor is dead. The flagship is destroyed. 2 battlecruisers remain, both heavily damaged. Initial estimates suggested this would be a simple conquest. Those estimates were completely wrong." Krill paused, organizing her thoughts. How could she explain what she had witnessed? How could she make the Empire understand what made humanity so dangerous? "The humans are unlike any species we have ever encountered," Krill continued. "They do not think like civilized beings. They have no unified command structure. Their planet is divided into hundreds of competing nations. By all military doctrine, this should make them weak and easy to conquer. Instead, it makes them unpredictable and dangerous. She pulled up data files showing the human attacks, the variety of weapons, the chaos of their tactics. Each human nation develops its own technology, its own strategies, its own approach to warfare. When we attacked, they used all of these different approaches simultaneously. We prepared for one type of enemy. They gave us dozens of different enemies all attacking at once. Our tactical systems could not adapt fast enough. Krill thought about the pilots who had flown converted civilian craft into battle, knowing they would probably die. She thought about the nuclear weapon that had been manually attached to her ship's hull. She thought about the determination she had seen in the humans she had questioned after being captured. The humans are reckless beyond any rational measure, Krill said. They will sacrifice themselves without hesitation if it serves their goals. During the orbital battle, we destroyed hundreds of their craft. Each loss would have been considered a tragedy by Zephyron standards. For humans, each loss seemed to inspire others to fight harder. They view death in combat as something honorable, something worth accepting for the good of their species. She reviewed the technical data on the weapon that had destroyed the flagship. Their technology is primitive in most ways, but they are highly creative. They adapt existing systems in unexpected ways. They combine different technologies in novel approaches. Most dangerous of all, they learn extremely quickly. In the 3 days between our warning and our attack, they developed multiple new weapon systems and coordinated a global defense strategy. Krill saved the technical data and continued her report. But the most terrifying aspect of humanity is their diversity. They are not one people with one way of thinking. They are thousands of different cultures, philosophies, and approaches to problem solving. Every crazy idea, every experimental technology, every unconventional strategy gets tried by someone. What works, they keep. What fails, they learn from. They iterate and innovate faster than any species we have encountered. She leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of what she had to say next. My recommendation to the Empire is clear. Quarantine Earth. Mark it as a forbidden zone. Never return to that system. The humans are currently confined to their planet, but they will not remain that way for long. They will reverse engineer our technology. They will develop faster than light travel. And when they do, they will come looking for us. Krill ended the recording and sent it through the faster-than-light communication system. The message would reach the Empire in days. What the leadership decided to do with that information was beyond her control. She had done her duty. Now she just wanted to go home and try to forget the blue planet that had destroyed an invasion fleet. On Earth, the celebration was tempered by mourning. Every nation held ceremonies for the fallen pilots and soldiers. Streets were lined with people honoring the dead. But even in grief, there was determination. Humanity had proven something important. They could defend themselves. They were not helpless victims waiting to be conquered. President Helen Carter stood at Arlington National Cemetery, watching as flag-draped coffins were laid to rest. These were just some of the casualties. Around the world, similar ceremonies were happening in every nation that had contributed to the defense. The cost had been high, but the alternative would have been slavery or extinction. After the ceremony, Helen returned to the White House for a meeting with military and scientific leaders. General Ben Harris was there, along with Colonel Jake Morrison, Dr. Lisa Chen, and representatives from dozens of other nations via video conference. We won the battle, Helen said, but the war isn't over. The Zephyron will report back to their empire. More aliens will hear about Earth. Some might come to trade, others to conquer. We need to be ready. Dr. Lisa Chen pulled up holographic displays showing Zephyron technology they had recovered. Pieces of destroyed attack craft had been collected and were being studied in laboratories around the world. We can learn from this, Lisa said. They're faster than light drives, their shields, their weapon systems. It will take years to fully understand, but we can do it. We can build our own starships. On how long? Asked the Chinese premier. 5 years to build a prototype, Lisa estimated. 10 years to have a real fleet. But that's if we work together, share research, pool resources. If every nation tries to do this alone, it will take much longer. General Ben Harris spoke up. The aliens underestimated us because we were divided. But our diversity saved us. Different nations, different ideas, different approaches. That's our strength. We need to keep that, but we also need to coordinate better. The discussion continued for hours. They talked about building a unified space defense force while still maintaining individual national militaries. They discussed sharing technology while respecting intellectual property. They debated how to prepare for future threats without turning Earth into a militarized fortress. High above the Earth, work was already beginning. The International Space Station had been damaged during the battle, but it was being rebuilt and expanded. Engineers were designing new modules that would serve as shipyards. Construction crews were preparing to harvest asteroids for raw materials. Slowly, carefully, humanity was beginning to build its first true warships. Colonel Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt space station, looking down at Earth. The planet looked peaceful from up here, a beautiful blue and white sphere floating in darkness. But Jake knew that peace had been hard-won and might not last. Lieutenant Amy Parker floated up beside him. She had survived her mission and returned as a hero. Now she was training to be a captain on one of the new ships being designed. "What are you thinking about?" she asked Jake. "The future," Jake replied. "The Zephron thought we were weak because we were divided. They didn't understand that our differences made us strong. Every nation brought something unique to the fight. Now we need to take that strength and use it to protect ourselves." "Do you think they'll come back?" Amy asked. "Maybe," Jake said. "Or maybe some other species will come. The universe is big, and we just announced to everyone out there that Earth is inhabited and defended. Some aliens will see that as a challenge. Others will see it as an opportunity. We need to be ready for both." Down on Earth, in the halls of the Zephron Empire, Krill's report was being reviewed by the highest military commanders. They watched the recordings of the battle, studied the tactical analysis, and read her recommendations with growing concern. The debate was fierce. Some wanted to send a larger fleet to crush Earth and restore the Empire's honor. Others argued that Earth should be left alone, at least until they better understood human capabilities. In the end, caution won. The Empire issued orders to avoid the Sol system. They marked Earth on their star charts with a warning symbol. The symbol meant, dangerous species, unpredictable behavior, do not engage without overwhelming force. For the first time in centuries, the Zephron Empire had found a species they feared, and on Earth humanity looked to the stars with new eyes. They had defended their home. They had proven they could fight back against superior technology. Now they were preparing to ensure that no one would ever threaten Earth again. The age of humanity's expansion into space had begun, born from necessity and tempered by battle. They had thought Earth was weak. They had thought wrong, and now the galaxy knew that humanity was not prey. They were survivors, innovators,